You know the name, right? Rumi? His words are literally everywhere, from social media bios to wedding invitations. But how on earth did a Persian scholar from the 13th century become one of the biggest pop culture icons of the 21st? Okay, let's get into it.
I bet you've seen this one floating around, or something just like it. His quotes on love and life are some of the most shared things on the internet. They just feel so timeless, so universal. But you know, his modern-day celebrity status? That's really just the tip of the iceberg of a much, much deeper story.
And get this, it might actually blow your mind to hear that today, almost 800 years after he died, Jalal ad-Din Rumi is one of the most popular, most read poets in the entire United States. His book sales? We're talking over 500,000 copies pretty regularly. So yeah, this isn't just some internet trend. It's a massive cultural phenomenon.
So that's the big question we're digging into today, isn't it? To really get the quotes, you have to understand the man who wrote them. And let me tell you, his real story is way more dramatic, more revolutionary, and honestly, a lot more mysterious than a simple Instagram post could ever show you. All right, let's time travel. We're going way, way back to the city of Konya in what's now Turkey, and we're there to meet a man who is the absolute pillar of his community, a guy at the top of his game, who has no idea his entire world is about to get flipped completely upside down. I mean, just look at this. Before he was the poet of love that we all know, Rumi was, well, he was the man. A super respected religious authority, head of a major school, an expert in Islamic law, a famous preacher. He was successful, totally conventional, and basically doing everything right, following in his dad's footsteps.
And then, boom, everything changes. On this one single day, this very established, very respectable scholar has an encounter that isn't just going to alter his life. It's an encounter that's going to ripple through time and, crazy enough, end up on your social media feed.
He meets this guy, Shams of Tabriz. Now, Shams was the polar opposite of Rumi. He wasn't your typical scholar at all. He was this older, mysterious, wandering mystic, and he'd been traveling all over the Middle East, literally praying to find just one person who could truly understand him, spiritually. And in Rumi, he finally found that person.
And the change was wow. It was instant, and it was total. These two guys, they basically locked themselves away for months, just lost in these deep spiritual conversations. When Rumi finally came out, he was a completely different man. The serious, by-the-book scholar, gone. In his place was this ecstatic poet, a mystic who is now all about listening to music, dancing, and writing poetry praising his incredible new friend.
But this incredible, all-consuming friendship, it ends in tragedy. Just like that, one night, Shams vanishes. Gone. Never seen again. It's widely believed he was murdered. And the worst part? Possibly with the help of Rumi's own son, who was incredibly jealous of Shams's influence. You can just imagine, this loss completely shattered Rumi.
But it's right there in the middle of all that profound grief that his poetic genius is truly born. After looking everywhere for Shams, Rumi has this incredible realization, a real aha moment. He understood that the divine love and truth he saw in Shams was actually a reflection of what was inside himself all along. Shams had been the mirror. And with that, the poetry just started pouring out of him. We're talking thousands and thousands of verses. Okay, so that's the personal story, this huge personal earthquake. But let's look at the philosophy that came out of it, and how it builds into this universal message. Because Rumi's poetry isn't just about heartbreak, it's a full-on roadmap to the divine, all built on a core principle of his faith. And that core idea is called Tawheed. Basically, it's the foundational Islamic concept of the absolute oneness of God. But for Rumi, this wasn't some dry academic idea you just read about. No way. It was a lived reality, something you had to feel, to experience. And the way to do that? Through the all-consuming fire of love. So for Rumi, love was how you put Tawheed into practice. Think of it like a fire that, once it really gets going, it just burns away your ego, your sense of self, all the illusions that make you feel separate. And when all that's gone, the only thing left is the reality of the one everlasting beloved, which for him was God. This whole journey of theme in his masterpiece, the Mesnevi. He describes the soul's journey back to God not as one big leap, but as this kind of cosmic evolution. He saw the soul moving through stages, from mineral to plant, plant to animal, animal to human, each time shedding an old form to rise to a new one, all of it drawn upward by this constant pull of love back towards its divine home. So you might be asking, okay, how do you actually walk this path? Well, for Rumi, it wasn't enough to just believe it. You had to practice it.
Poetry was his way of expressing the journey. Music, especially that haunting sound of the reed flute, was a tool to help focus the soul. And of course, the most famous part, the dance, the whirling sema. That became a physical embodiment of the soul's mystical journey towards God. Now, after Rumi's death, these practices and this philosophy, they didn't just stay in 13th century Konya. Oh no, they started a journey of their own, one that would cross continents and centuries, and eventually land right here, with us, today.
I mean, listen to this. This was his epitaph, and it turned out to be unbelievably prophetic. Sure, his actual tomb in Konya is a huge pilgrimage site, but his real, lasting legacy wasn't built in stone. It was built in the hearts of people all over the globe.
And it was a long journey. First, his son and followers formed the Mevlevi order. You probably know them as the whirling dervishes. For centuries, his influence was mostly contained to the Persian-speaking and Ottoman worlds. It wasn't until the 1800s that he started getting noticed in the West, through these dry academic translations. But the real superstar status, that came in the late 20th century, when new, more poetic versions made him a global phenomenon.
But this journey to global stardom, it's not without its problems. In fact, the way most of us in the West encounter Rumi today is at the very heart of a passionate debate about authenticity, interpretation, and translation.
Take this quote. It's one of his most famous in English. And it's beautiful, right? It's so open and inviting. It speaks to that universal desire we all have for a place of peace beyond all the judgment. It's really easy to see why it resonates so deeply with so many different people. But then, you have this. This headline from The New Yorker perfectly captures the big criticism from many scholars and people from Rumi's own tradition. They argue that in the process of making Rumi universal, something absolutely essential has been lost. Or even worse, it's been actively erased.
And this really gets to the heart of it. Rumi wasn't some generic spiritual guru. He was a master Islamic scholar, and his work is absolutely soaked in references to the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad. In fact, his masterpiece, the Mesnevi, is often called the Quran in Persian. The debate is all about the popular English versions, which often aren't direct translations from Persian, but more like reinterpretations of older translations. And in that process, the specific religious context often gets stripped away, to make it all feel a bit more secular and universally spiritual.
And this brings us right back to the beginning. It's so important to remember who Rumi actually was, a man of his time and his place, a 13th century Persian-speaking Sunni Muslim and Sufi mystic living in Anatolia. His incredible philosophy of universal love grew out of a very specific spiritual and intellectual soil. And so that leaves us with a final question to think about. There's no doubt that Rumi's words have brought inspiration and comfort to millions. But it does force us to ask, when we take a figure from another time, another culture, another faith, and we make him our own, what's the line between appreciation and appropriation? And in our search for a universal message, what essential truths might get lost in translation?